Welcome to the weekly weather brief. I'm meteorologist Kerrin Jeromin alongside
meteorologist Emily Gracey. And guess what, guys? We are at the American Meteorological Society's annual meeting, and we're in person together.
I know,
which is great.
exciting. We're actually next to each other, which is like a weird thing in our long career of
I know.
this podcast, which is 2 episodes in.
Yes. Second episode, we launched that last week. We're sharing this with everybody, the world now. So excited that we actually get to tell people about this because we've been recording for months now and getting a feel for what we want to do. So it's exciting to be here and actually share this with the world. But I think also because we've been doing this for months and not sharing it with the world, we've kind of forgotten that we need to maybe reintroduce ourselves.
Right. Okay.
And who we are and what we do.
Right, exactly. So you already got our name. So the gist of this podcast is we're doing a weekly snippet for you. We're giving you bite-sized information about whatever the topic of the week is in weather, climate, sciences, right? Mostly focus on weather because we're both former broadcast meteorologists. And so that's what kind of sparks our interest. But there's so many interesting things happening just in the greater weather, water, and climate enterprise that sometimes captures the attention of this community. And we want to talk about it.
Yeah.
In a short snippet.
Exactly. There's so many podcasts out there that are an hour long, sometimes 2 hours. So our goal with this is to give you a really concise information in 10 minutes. So whether you're walking to work, going to walk your dog, driving to work, whatever you're doing. So we're going to give you that information pretty quickly.
Okay, so with that, we've eaten.
I know.
Let's get this going. Like you mentioned, we're here in Houston, Texas at the annual American Meteorological Society conference. I, for one, love this conference. It's always inspirational. It's always exciting to be here and see all different sectors of, again, weather, water, and climate coming together into one space and having good, productive conversations.
Yeah, there have been a lot of productive conversations, and we're still in it right now. So this is a week-long conference. I'm curious though, because we've kind of attended a few different sessions, and do you have any takeaways so far, like the themes for this year and what you've really seen people talk about the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest conversation is that we're clearly at a big changing point, right? There's a lot of change in science in general with the emerging use of AI and the value of that, but also maybe some ethical questions about it. And how do we responsibly integrate that into ways that can be really useful? We're at a turning point as far as eroding public trust in science. We're at a point where misinformation and disinformation is such a challenge when it comes to scientific topics. And so I think because of that, that's my takeaway of the week, is that we're really tackling this time of unprecedented change in not only technology, but in staffing, in changes with government staffing in particular, right? Since what's the word I want to use? Just enormous change over the past year. Certain agencies having to get rid of staff. And I think because of that, we're forcing really good conversation this week of how do we move forward in the best way with all of these topics change.
Yeah, and if anything, if something good has come out of this, I think it is that there is not this distance between the different sectors anymore. It used to be like government, academia, broadcast, private sector. I feel like I've seen so many people leaving maybe government, going into private sector, leaving broadcasting, going into something else. So, but the mission that everybody has here is the same. It's like, how can we do this best? How can we translate this information the best? So it's nice to talk to people who have different backgrounds from me and kind of learn good ways to communicate, what they're working on, and how we as communicators could share that information. So it's been really exciting, but it's also kind of a reminder of like the really terrible things that happened in the past year, because that is what this conference looks at too. It kind of dissects what went wrong with this event. How do we improve our forecasting? How do we improve our communication to the public on how to stay safe? So it's a lot to think about, but the Texas flooding has been kind of something that's been talked about as well. I went to a panel this morning to kind of learn about that and what could have been done differently and the good things that may come out of such a terrible situation.
Okay, walk me back a little bit. So there's a panel discussion on the Texas flooding, and you're referring to the ones this summer where there was flooding and took many lives. A lot of people remember it from the girls.
The girls' camp,
that were killed in the camp. And so I didn't go to that session, but were there takeaways of, was it communication? Was it just awareness of such an extreme event?
Flooding in general is a very difficult thing, especially from the broadcast side, to share that information. It's not like severe storms, tornadoes take cover now. It's hard. It hit in the middle of the night. There were a lot of things that went wrong. Communication was a problem in the way of weather radios maybe weren't known about. People didn't have them as much, but there was a huge resurgence of weather radios being bought. After I talked to Bruce Jones from Midland Weather Radio, and he was saying after that event, huge amount of people purchased weather radios, and they're modernizing weather radio, from what I understand too.
It's almost reverting back to what would be considered an older technology, right? Everyone's looking at their phones now, but when you're in maybe a camp that is in a very remote area, service isn't great. Are those still reliable? Yes, in some cases, but it makes you question, like, what are my alert methods and what do we need to be doing differently to make sure that these alerts are getting to all possible places? And that's always been a challenge, in especially forecasting and real-time weather. But again, this conference is great for that because it brings together not just people who are always in communication, but different minds now using technology in different ways to improve that in the future.
Yep. A lot of talk of digital, which, this is a form of digital. We are doing digital. We're finding a new way to share weather information. There's been a lot of talk of that. I haven't heard a lot of talk of podcasting this. So I think there's some room for growth there.
Yeah.
But a lot of people starting almost their own TV stations within their homes to share information and to take control of the message, not having to deal with maybe a news director or a general manager or salespeople. You're answering to the community and as a meteorologist. So I love that control that's being taken over and how people are really going for it. And they're putting forth a lot of money and resources. I mean, some meteorologists are putting everything on the line to kind of take on this new frontier. So.
Yeah. And you're speaking to a lot of the broadcast side because obviously, again, that's our field. So we were dipping into a lot of those broadcast conferences topics, but I went to a couple others, and I think that's a common theme across the attendance here, right, is the change in government, academia, and funding that's been taken away. And it's just forcing us to think a little bit differently than in the past where things have been maybe quite steady for a long time. And we've relied on certain ways of doing things. And so with change sometimes comes really great discussion. And, even despite hardship of change, I think this is exactly the kind of thing that sparks the right conversations to say, how can we think about it differently and do it differently? And where can skills be used in other ways that have not been used before on an individual level and an organizational level? So, all that to say, I think there's a lot of downside to the change that has happened, but a lot of good things potentially to come. And that's the hope. And
we have to be challenged to
inspiration that comes from the conference.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was last year at this conference was there was this overwhelming feeling of impending doom. And so maybe this year it's a little more hopeful, I think.
It is.
We're still here. We are still here. Everybody still came despite the weather, despite cuts.
Asterisks.
Yeah.
Asterisks. There is actually quite a bit of there's some lower attendance, I think. Some people didn't make it because of this past week's storm. Speaking of the last week in weather, that was, of course, the big news was big old storm from coast to coast. We talked about that in our first episode, and it did disrupt some people's ability to be here.
And guess what, Kerrin? There's another one on the way.
Yeah.
So monitor if you're living in these areas that could be dealing with some snow this weekend. We haven't had time to put forth too much effort into that one, so don't come to us for the forecast, but it is important to sailor and lessons learned from last week's storm of what ice can do, what power outages are like. So just tune into your local forecaster, National Weather Service, or your local TV meteorologist.
Okay, quick note on that one. So because I knew we were going to just touch on that storm and this coming storm, I did take a peek at forecast quick.
Okay.
And I don't have details, right? I'm not going to go and say anything, but I think this is a good communication lesson, right? We've just been hit with a pretty big storm, right? From coast to coast, it was an impact. And so when we start using, when I say we, collectively, communicators say, here comes the next one, here's another one coming, immediately people know what they know. They go back to what just happened. Is that they say, no, we're going to get 2 feet of snow again. We're going to get an inch of ice again. And we have to be careful because every storm is different, right? This one's going to impact different areas and bring different risks. So just like in hurricanes, you can't just say another storm is coming because it's so different. So as you said,
I mean, it's cliche and we fall into those things. So very good point. You should have gone into social science. You know that?
I mean, think by being a communicator.
Yeah. So it's a whole world. But we would love for you to follow us. We have the podcast now out and available. You can follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Kerrin, Jeromin, Emily, Gracey. We've hit our 10-minute mark, but it's been a pleasure chatting with you this week. And we'll be here next Friday. Every Friday, we're going to bring you all the information.
We hope to see you then. Maybe with a glass of wine next week. We'll see.
Yeah. we'll see how this week goes.
Thanks, everyone.